My brother handed me a bill at Christmas dinner. Not a card, not a gift. A printed invoice, itemized with my name at the top and a total at the bottom, $62,400. He slid it across the table between the mashed potatoes and the gravy boat like it was nothing, like he was passing the salt. I stared at it. My eyes read the number 3 times before my brain caught up. "That's what we need from you," he said, "for the house." Before I tell you what I said back, and what I did in the weeks after, I want to know where you're watching from right now. Drop your city and the time in the comments. I read every single one. I need to back up. I'm the older one. By 4 years. When our parents divorced, I was 11, my brother was 7. I became the one who kept things together. Not because anyone asked me to. Just because someone had to. My mom worked doubles at the hospital on weekdays. My dad reappeared every few months with new excuses and occasionally a $20 bill, so I packed my brother's lunch. I helped him with homework. I showed up to his school plays when my mom couldn't get off her shift. I did it because I loved him. That's the whole reason. There was no other reason. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I had a decent job, project coordinator at a mid-sized logistics firm. Nothing glamorous. But I was careful with money the way people are careful with money when they grew up without it. I had savings. I had a small emergency fund. I had a Roth IRA that I was genuinely proud of. My brother is different. He's charming in a way I never was. People like him instantly. He married young. His wife is sweet. I genuinely mean that. And they had their first kid at 24. They've always lived slightly beyond what they earn. Not dramatically. Just enough that there's never any cushion. For years, little things would come up. His transmission blew out, could I help? The baby needed a specialist. Insurance didn't cover it, could I help? They got behind on rent one winter, just 2 months, could I help? I helped. Every time. Because I loved him. Because I remembered packing his lunch. Because I told myself family doesn't keep score. I stopped keeping track after about $14,000 over 5 years. I didn't stop because I had forgotten. I stopped because I didn't want to know. The house thing started in the fall. My brother called me in October to say he and his wife had found their dream home. 3 bedrooms, good school district, decent yard for the kids. The price was just slightly out of reach. They were short on the down payment and their debt-to-income ratio was making lenders nervous. "We just need a bridge," he said, "just until we get our footing." I told him I'd think about it. I thought about it for 3 weeks. I talked to my best friend about it. I talked to myself about it at 2 in the morning, more times than I can count. The number they needed wasn't small, but I had it and he was my brother. I told him I couldn't do the full amount, but I could do part of it. 15,000. That was my limit. That was the number I could give without it hurting me. He said okay. He seemed grateful. I transferred the money in November. We didn't put anything in writing. I know. Christmas is the big holiday in our family. My mom's side does it properly. Her house, her cooking, everyone comes. My aunt and uncle drive in from 2 states over. My cousins bring their kids. It's the one time a year we're all in the same room, and it's usually good. Loud and a little chaotic and genuinely good. This year there were about 30 people there. I arrived around noon. I helped my mom in the kitchen. I played with my nephew who had just turned 3 and was obsessed with showing me every single ornament on the tree individually. It was a normal Christmas. I felt okay. We sat down to eat around 2. My brother was at the other end of the table from me. His wife was next to him, nursing their youngest. My mom was at the head. Everyone was talking, passing dishes, doing the thing families do. And then my brother stood up. I thought he was going to make a toast. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He walked around the table. I watched him the whole way, confused, and he set it down in front of me. "We need to talk about this," he said, out loud, in front of everyone. I unfolded it. It was a printout, formatted like an invoice. My name at the top, his name below it, the date, and then a list. The $15,000 I'd given him for the down payment. A number I'd sent him 2 Christmases ago for the car repair. Another number from the year before for the medical bill. Items going back 4 years. Things I had given him freely. Things I had never once called loans. Things I had never asked to be repaid. And at the bottom, a total, $62,400. Below the total, a note, amount owed. Please remit by January 31st. I looked up at him. What is this? It's what you owe us, he said. I heard someone at the table go quiet. Then the quiet spread. I don't understand, I said. I was genuinely confused. I gave you that money. You gave it to us as loans, he said. We have it documented. I felt something go very still in my chest. No, I said. I didn't. You did. We wrote it down every time. We have records. His wife was looking at the table, not at me, at the table. My mom said his name, quietly, like a warning. He kept going. We're not trying to make this a big thing. We just need you to acknowledge what you owe and work out a payment plan. We've been patient. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment. Because it wasn't what I expected. I thought I would cry. I didn't. I thought I would get loud. I didn't do that either. What I felt was a very clean, very cold kind of clarity. I folded the paper in half. I put it in my pocket. I picked up my fork, and I finished my plate. Nobody said anything for a long time. My aunt tried to restart a conversation about something on television. One of my cousins started talking to her husband in a low voice. My mom kept looking at me. After dinner, my brother pulled me aside in the hallway. I know that was uncomfortable, he said, but we're serious. We need this resolved. Where did this number come from? I asked. He said his wife had gone back through their bank records and her journal, she keeps a journal, and documented every transfer I'd ever sent them along with the conversations around it, and she believed that I had represented these as loans at the time. She believes, I said. We both believe it. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and I thought about the lunchboxes. I thought about the school plays. I thought about the transmission and the medical bill, and every time I'd said, of course, don't worry about it, that's what family is for. I said, I need some time to think. He said, January 31st. I drove home. I want to tell you something about the drive home because it matters. I didn't call anyone. I didn't turn on music. I drove 40 minutes in complete silence and I made a list in my head, not of the money, of the decisions. The first decision I made was that I was not going to pay that invoice. The second decision was that I was not going to make that my only move. I had given my brother $15,000 less than 2 months ago. It was not a loan. I had no documentation saying it was a loan because it wasn't one, but he apparently had his wife's journal saying it was. I didn't know what that would look like if he actually tried to pursue this legally. I didn't know enough to know. So, the next morning, December 26th, I called a lawyer. Not a family friend, not someone I found on a list. I paid for an actual consultation with an actual attorney who specialized in civil disputes. She listened to everything. She asked good questions. She said that without a signed promissory note, the transfers would be very difficult to characterize as loans, and that a journal entry from his wife would be unlikely to hold up. She also said that the way he presented this, publicly, in writing, with a deadline, was consistent with a pressure tactic rather than a legitimate legal claim. Then she said something I've thought about almost every day since. She said, the question isn't whether he can win. The question is what you want your life to look like in 5 years. I thought about that for a long time. I did not respond to my brother's invoice. I didn't call him. I didn't text him. I didn't send an email explaining myself or defending myself or asking him to reconsider. I went quiet in a way I had never gone quiet in my entire life, because I had always been the one who tried to fix things. My mom called me on December 28th. She said she didn't know this was coming, which I believed. She said she was sorry it happened the way it did. She said my brother was going through a lot of financial stress and she thought he'd panicked. I said, I know. She said, can you two work it out? I said, I don't know yet. She didn't push. My mom is good at knowing when not to push. My brother texted me on January 3rd, just the date, January 31st. Like a reminder. Like I was a vendor who had missed a payment. I didn't respond. His wife called me on January 9th. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message saying she hoped we could resolve this before it affected the kids, and that she and my brother had been under so much pressure and she hoped I understood. I listened to the voicemail twice. I did not call her back. Here's what I was doing instead. I went back through 5 years of my own bank records, every transfer I had ever sent my brother. I documented all of it, dates, amounts, any texts or emails around the time of each transfer. I was looking for anything in my own messages that could be read as loan language. Words like pay me back or when you can or just a loan for now. I didn't find any. Because I had never said those things. Because I had always said don't worry about it and that's what family is for. What I found instead was a pattern. Not of loans, of escalation. Each ask was a little bigger than the last. Each one came with a reason that was hard to argue with. The car, the baby, the rent. And each time I had said yes, the next ask came faster. I printed all of it. I put it in a folder. I also, quietly, reviewed a few other things. My brother and I were listed as co-beneficiaries on a small account my grandmother had set up before she passed. It wasn't much, maybe $8,000, but it existed. I contacted the financial institution and updated my own records and contact information, not to take anything, just to make sure I knew where things stood. And I called HR and my company, not because my brother knew where I worked, but because I knew he did. I gave them a heads up that I was dealing with a personal situation and asked them to flag any unusual external inquiries about me. They were professional and kind about it. I don't know if he ever would have done anything. I just didn't want to be surprised. January 31st came and went. My brother sent me a text that morning. Today's the date. Are you going to handle this or not? I read it. I set my phone down. I went to work. That evening he called me 3 times. I didn't answer. He left one voicemail. I listened to it. He said he was serious and that he had options and that I was making this harder than it needed to be. His voice was tight in the way voices get when someone is scared but trying to sound certain. I felt something I hadn't expected. Sad. Not angry. Not vindicated. Just sad. Because I could hear, under the tightness, the 7-year-old I had packed lunch for. And I understood, in a way I hadn't before, that the person I had spent years protecting had never fully learned how to be okay. And now, instead of dealing with that, he had decided I was the problem. I texted him back that night. One message. I said, I didn't loan you that money. I gave it to you. There's nothing to pay back. And there's nothing to pay back. And there's nothing to collect. If you'd like to talk, I'm here, but I won't be responding to invoices. He didn't reply. 3 weeks later, my mom called me again. She said my brother had gone to a lawyer. The lawyer had apparently told him that without documentation, he had a very weak case. She said he was embarrassed. She said his wife had been driving this more than he had, and now they were fighting about it. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't say anything like that. I asked my mom how she was doing. She said, tired. I said I knew. My cousin texted me separately. She'd been at Christmas dinner. She'd seen the whole thing and said she was sorry she hadn't said anything in the moment. She said she didn't know what to do. I told her it was okay, because it was. I want to tell you what happened with my brother, because this is where it gets complicated in a way I didn't expect. He called me in February. Not a demanding call. A different kind of call. He asked if he could come over. I said yes. He sat at my kitchen table and he didn't bring up the invoice. He talked around it for a while and then he said he was sorry. Not a big speech. Just, I'm sorry. That was wrong. I was scared and I did something wrong. I asked him whose idea the invoice was. He was quiet for a moment and then he said it had been his wife's, but that he'd agreed to it and that agreeing to it was on him. I believed him. I don't know if I should have, but I did. We talked for about 2 hours. It was one of the harder conversations I've had with another person. We talked about money and what it does to people and what our childhood did to both of us in ways we'd never actually named before. He cried. I didn't, but it was close. I told him I wasn't going to disappear from his life, but I told him that the money was done, not as a punishment, just as a fact. The version of me who said yes to every ask without a thought, that person had to stop, because she was running on empty and she'd been running on empty for years without admitting it. He said he understood. I don't know what happens next with his wife. That's between them. She hasn't called me again and I haven't called her. We'll see. What I know now that I didn't know before Christmas, the help I gave my brother all those years came from a real place. It was real love. But somewhere along the way it stopped being a choice and started being a reflex. And reflexes don't have limits. The invoice was terrible. The way he did it was cruel and humiliating, and I won't pretend otherwise. But it also forced something into the open that had been building for a long time. And I'd rather know than not know. I didn't pay the $62,400. I was never going to. But I also didn't blow up my family over it. What I did was get quiet, get organized, and get clear on what I was actually willing to do. The answer was not that. But also, still here. If you've had someone in your family treat generosity like a debt, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments what you did, or what you wish you'd done. And if you're watching this right now carrying something like this alone, I hope this helped even a little. They called me selfish for not paying. They called me cold for going quiet. Maybe. But I slept fine on January 31st. And I haven't written anyone an invoice yet. Like this video if it hit somewhere real. And stick around. Because the next story is one I've been sitting on for a while, and it's even harder to tell. I've thought a lot about what made that invoice possible. Not the document itself. The years before it. Every time I said yes without thinking, I taught someone that yes was automatic. Every time I transferred money with, "Don't worry about it," I was telling the truth about how I felt. But I was also setting a precedent I didn't know I was setting. Generosity without boundaries doesn't disappear into gratitude. Sometimes it disappears into expectation. And expectation, left long enough, starts to feel like entitlement, and entitlement, when it gets desperate, reaches for whatever leverage it can find. That's not an excuse for what my brother did. It's just the honest shape of how we got there. What I keep coming back to is the question of what I actually owed him, not legally, not financially. But in the deeper sense, what does one person owe another person they love? I think the answer is your real self, not your most agreeable self. Not the version of you that absorbs everyone else's problems so they don't have to sit with discomfort. Your actual self with actual limits, making actual choices. I had not been doing that. I had been running a version of love that looked generous on the outside but was quietly costing me things I hadn't named yet. Savings I'd worked for, sleep I'd lost, a low-grade anxiety every time my phone rang and his name appeared. I told myself it was family. It was. But it was also a pattern I had participated in building, one quiet yes at a time. The invoice was cruel. The public humiliation was something I'll carry for a long time. But the thing that actually changed me wasn't the invoice, it was the silence after. The 40-minute drive home, the list I made in my head. The moment I stopped asking, how do I fix this, and started asking, what do I actually want my life to look like? Clarity is uncomfortable to come by. It usually requires something to break first. What I know now is that intelligence without honesty is just strategy. And strategy without ethics is just manipulation, which is exactly what that invoice was. My brother is not a bad person, but he made a bad choice, and bad choices have weight. They press down on relationships, on trust, on the version of yourself you thought you knew. He's living with that weight now. So am I, in a different way. What got me through wasn't anger. Anger burns fast and leaves nothing useful. What got me through was deciding, very quietly, to handle myself with the same care I had spent years extending to everyone else. To consult a lawyer instead of panicking. To document instead of react. To wait instead of escalate. That's not coldness. That's a kind of discipline I wish I'd learned earlier. The discipline of protecting yourself not out of fear, but out of respect for the life you've actually built. My brother apologized. I believe he meant it. We're somewhere in the early stages of figuring out what comes next, and I don't know yet what that looks like. But I know what it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like me saying yes before I've thought it through. It doesn't look like money moving without honesty around it. It doesn't look like love that costs the person giving it everything while costing the person receiving it nothing. Whatever comes next, I'm building it on something real. That's the only kind of foundation that holds.